Hi WIAL community, my name is Shannon Banks. I'm very sorry to not be with you in Brazil for this year's conference, but I'm delighted to have a few minutes to speak to you. In this video, I want to spend just a few minutes talking to you about the neuroscience of questions and how action learning can help to improve mental wellness in the workplace. I wanted to start by just talking about how important I think this topic of mental health is and how pleased I am that it's this year's theme. This is the worst it's ever been in terms of the amount of stress that we're carrying in the workplace. According to a charity here in the UK where I live, 91% of workers in the past 12 months have felt either very stressed or extremely stressed. And this is really difficult. One of the reasons that our stress levels are so high and that there are so many cases of burnout in the workplace is the amount of data that we are having to deal with. Partially because of technology, the amount of data in the world is growing exponentially. And that is where I want to start in talking about neuroscience. Data says that we apparently are bombarded with about 11 million bits of information every second, but our brains can actually only absorb about 2,000. So because of the primitive nature of our brain and how it developed over time, the way we filter that information is to ignore the things that don't matter. And what doesn't matter to us is stuff that keeps us safe. Because back in hundreds of thousands of years ago, we needed to focus on the threats in order to stay alive. That may still be true. There are fewer physical threats to us than there used to be, however. But what's happened in our brain is we're still doing the filtering, still looking for patterns, but most of the things that we see as threatening are social. Some of you may have heard of David Rock from the Neuroleadership Institute. What he and the Neuroleadership Institute did was think about and classify the types of social threats that we face. And he came up with an acronym called SCARF, which some of you may have heard of, which is an acronym that classifies these different types of social threats. And what I'd like to do is talk about each of these and how action learning helps to kind of overcome that threat, and in fact provide reward to counter that threat. So let's start with the first one. This model is SCARF, S-C-A-R-F, and the first letter S is status. Now, status is all about where you stand in relation to others. You can face a status threat if you have to go give a presentation to a big CEO or a really important person. You can also face a status threat if you feel someone is belittling you. In action learning, we help to overcome status threats by allowing everyone to have a voice and to flatten hierarchy. So in a normal meeting, a leader will come into the meeting, have a topic, and in a lot of organizations, there's a lot of command and control. So the leader may consult with and collaborate with a team, but ultimately, in a lot of cases, they will go off and make the decision on their own. This is definitely not the case in action learning. And the way we work in action learning, everyone has a voice. And in fact, you can have action learning groups made up of many levels, and it equalizes the voice of everyone because of the questions. We often at Be Leadership, my company, run programs where we bring in emerging leaders and top talent all together in one action learning group. And they can feel empowered to communicate without any threat to their status. The second domain that I want to discuss is C, which is certainty. So we feel a certainty threat in times of change, when we don't know what's coming, when we can't anticipate what the next steps are. And in action learning, we have a process that we follow that people become used to, they can anticipate, and the coach provides guardrails to keep people feeling safe in the environment so that when they're working together, they can not feel threatened. They can feel a sense of belonging and trust and security that they know what to expect. The next letter in the SCARF model is A, and A is for autonomy. So we feel an autonomy threat if we don't have enough say in what's happening. I used to have a manager in one of my corporate roles that would ask me to fly over to the United States at a moment's notice, literally like in 2 days from the UK. And I would get an autonomy threat whenever I saw a meeting request from her because I was worried about that potential scenario. In action learning, the autonomy of the work belongs to the group. So as the coach, we leave the responsibility with the group so that they can make their own decisions, come up with their own solutions, find their own questions. It is not about us solving the problem. In quite a lot of our programs at Be Leadership, we have corporate leaders and social entrepreneurs working together on challenges in the emerging markets. And the social entrepreneurs come from organizations in those local markets, and they're working on big, important challenges that are socioeconomic. In action learning, the group is not solving that problem on behalf of this organization. They are coming together, working together jointly, autonomously to solve the problem. And the social entrepreneur is empowered to then go back to their organizations and resolve the issues or move the issues forward. The fourth part of the SCARF model is relatedness. And relatedness is really important within the context of action learning. This is all about your sense of belonging. And the reason action learning is so powerful for relatedness is that the questions that are used in action learning help break down barriers, create a sense of trust, create connections that really matter for people. When we ask a question, it actually shifts the processing in the brain from what might have been the limbic system or the flight and fight part of the brain that's more emotional to the frontal lobe or the more rational part of the brain so that the person can answer the question. And this allows for much stronger relationships between people. I often tell people that even if all they're doing is asking for permission, it reduces that threat response and allows the person listening to then listen to the advice. So if you say, can I have permission to share something, then you get a better response to what you've shared. So in action learning, where we ask these wonderful, open, and powerful questions, it creates much stronger connections between the team members. Finally, F is for fairness. And fairness can mean actually two different things. One is that I'm not getting treated, I have a threat response, a fairness threat response, if I'm not treated the same as everyone else. And the other definition is I'm not being treated appropriately given my situation. And as humans, we go back and forth between those definitions. In action learning, as a coach, we set up the process to be fair, and we coach the group so that they get equal time, equal space. We make sure everyone's voice is heard. And in the learning review, for example, we ensure each person gets an equal amount of time to consider and reflect on their learning and get feedback from their peers. So across the board, action learning helps to reduce the potential threat response that we might feel in the workplace and create a sense of reward around these 5 important domains that make up the SCARF model. In so doing, it helps to allow us to work more productively, more effectively, and with better mental health. I hope that you have a wonderful conference, and I want to thank you for your attention.